Hello, this is Paola Guthrie from Creating Purpose with Pao, and I welcome you to the Spanglish World Network and Her Network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download Zingo TV app on the respective app stores. The app is totally free, and you can find it in Google Chromecast and Amazon Fire TV Stick, Roku Stick, and all smart TVs from 2016 and forward. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today because we have a very special guest in the house. She's going to be talking about grieving and how that shifts our self esteem, it shifts our identity. Her name is Diana Parra. She's a transformational coach, neuroencoding specialist. She's an author. She is bilingual and she's also from Colombia. So thank you for being here. I send you a huge hug.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Paola. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited for this content and especially for having you here. So tell us, share with us, how did you dive into this journey of educating people about grieving?
Yes. So you know that I've been, in the coaching space for a long time, and working with, I started out working with leaders or managers, and now I work with women who have gone through some kind of transition, and they're feeling stuck. They have felt a loss of identity, and so what happened was I started thinking about my own experiences of loss. I had 4 miscarriages, and I got really curious about that process and why, after having those experiences, and I also, during one of the miscarriages, I also lost my dad. He passed away from cancer. So it was kind of like one on top of the other, right after the other. So I started getting curious about why I felt stuck after that and why it took me such a long time to get unstuck, with the help of a coach and through therapy and doing my own work. And so I got curious about it, and I had the opportunity to join a certification, grief educator certification. And so I took that opportunity, went through the program, got certified, and oh my goodness, what I learned about grief and grieving and how it can impact, our mental health and also our identity and our self-esteem was so valuable, because what I started to notice is that, with some of my clients, there was that element of grief that was keeping them stuck. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was in the beginning, at first. And after having, going through the certification and learning all this, I realized that it was unprocessed grief that sometimes can keep us stuck.
So, how does that unprocessed grief look like? Is it different for everyone?
It is different for everyone. So I'll tell you my experience. I basically, after having those experiences of loss,
Mm-hmm.
I jumped right into back into my life, back into work. Just I just kind of kept going and really didn't take the time to feel my feelings and to feel the pain and to feel the loss and to give myself permission and the time and the opportunity to just be where I was. Because the only way through any emotion is really going through the emotion, right? There's no way around it. We have to feel it. We have to feel it in order to heal it. And so, because I didn't want to feel the pain, I didn't want to feel the shame, the guilt, I just avoided that. And I jumped right back into my life, basically distractions, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to stay distracted. So I wanted to work. I wanted to do everything. And what ended up happening is, little by little, I was kind of stuffing those emotions. And
Okay.
eventually that, caught up with me. And I found myself really depressed, feeling really bad about myself, having a lot of shame and guilt around the miscarriages. I didn't talk about it really. And no one really, one thing about that I have to say about grief is grief needs to be witnessed, right? We need people around us to witness our grief. And that didn't happen because people didn't know that I was pregnant and that I had a miscarriage. And part of that is our culture here. I mean, we're, as women, we hear, don't tell anyone you're pregnant until after you've made that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because then if you have a miscarriage, then no one needs to know, which then creates a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And in my case, and I'm sure in many women who have had a similar experience, their grief isn't witnessed. So we don't get the support, that we need.
Okay. And it sounds like, there must be a support
Yes.
to help you with grief.
Yes.
So,
That's a very important piece.
how many years did it take you to find out that you needed to grieve, that you needed help?
Too many. Too many. It was over 10 years.
Wow.
Over 10 years. And so that's the thing. When I say, we kind of get stuck if we don't process our grief, right? And then it becomes more of like a complicated grief because, the grieving process is different for everyone. And there is no like specific timeline where like, okay, you grieve for a year and then you should be like kind of over it or, past the grieving. It's a very personal thing. So it's very different for each individual. But one thing I learned is that if it goes like over 2 years and it's really impacting your mental health and your life, then it becomes more like what they call complicated grief.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I believe that's what happened to me. And then it took me a while to kind of unprocess that. And I had to start with, in therapy, kind of going back and grieving the losses, and giving myself permission to feel those emotions so that I could then kind of like release that.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes we don't, we don't like to feel the pain, and then you say we get busy, we cover up with things that we have to do, our to-do list.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another thing is like we've also learned to be tough.
Yes.
You don't
And
cry,
that was
you
me.
move on.
That was me. And sometimes people, and again, this is why I'm so passionate now about like talking about, grief and educating people and learning myself learning more so that I can pass that information on to other people, and especially my clients, because if I think, or they talk about, their losses, then I can educate them on grief and the grieving process and normalize it and give them that safe space where they can feel the way they feel and understand their own process, because a lot of times we don't understand, how we're feeling, or we hear, okay, well, it's been 2 months. Shouldn't you kind of like be moving on with your life?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or it's been a year. Or, we hear things that really don't help us. For example, in my case, when I had the first miscarriage, my parents, they love me and, well-intentioned, but I broke down and I was crying, and immediately they're like, don't cry, don't cry, And I understand it hurt them to see their daughter in pain. Right. But I needed to cry. And, so it's little things, even little things like that. It's like, it was okay for me to cry. I mean, it was kind of expected for me to cry. Right. And so then you kind of learn like, oh, okay, I shouldn't cry. And then it becomes like, I shouldn't talk about this because other people can't handle it.
You don't want to cause them pain, or,
Exactly.
like share your pain because you don't know what to
Exactly.
do with it.
Exactly. But in reality, it's like, in that situation, the person needs other people to hold that space for them.
Yeah. Wow. It's like you're teaching us for, whenever we are on the other side,
Yeah.
how to support those who might be grieving. Could be a breakup. It could be your grieving is different. Tell us, okay, before we go dive into that, tell us the stages of grieving.
Okay, so there are 5 stages, right? And there's a book, and you can find it out there, by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she is the one that she was a pioneer, and she wrote about the grieving process, and she kind of came up with these stages based on what she witnessed, what she in her experience, right? So the first stage is denial, and it's kind of like you can't believe it, right? It's like that really didn't happen, that loss, that person isn't really gone. Then the second stage is anger. You feel angry about the loss, right? Maybe you even feel like the person abandoned you, even though it wasn't their choice. Then we have the third one, which is bargaining. You kind of like, well, maybe if I had done this, they wouldn't have gotten in the car and the accident wouldn't have happened. So in your mind, you start playing different scenarios as to how things could have been different, or something you did could have changed the outcome. Then the next stage is depression, where you just feel the pain and the sadness, and and I'm not talking about like clinical depression. I'm talking about just depression, right? And then the fifth stage is acceptance, where you kind of accept what's happened. Now, my mentor, the one that I was certified by for the grief educator, he worked closely with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and they co-wrote books and and things like that. And so he more recently wrote a book, and it's basically on the 6th stage of grieving, which I love because it's finding meaning.
Finding meaning.
And he did that. I think he started writing the book, and he had kind of put it aside, and then he lost his son. And then he went back to the book and wrote Finding Meaning, because I guess, that's what helped him.
Okay.
Yeah. So finding meaning is really, it's finding meaning. Doesn't need to be anything huge, but it can be finding meaning, not in the loss itself, but finding meaning in maybe your relationship with that person. Maybe you learned something from that person. Maybe their loss has now made you appreciate life more. That could be finding meaning. It could be that you decide to help other people, so it's really for the person to decide what that meaning is for them.
Okay.
Yes.
And this type of like steps can happen in what are some of the grieving examples? Because the first thing that comes to my mind is when you lose someone as they're not physically here on earth anymore. Usually that's the main association that we have, but we could be grieving different things. Could you explain a little bit what are some, what could be like grieving? What overtakes grieving? It's not just losing someone physically.
Right. And before I answer that question, let me just say that the stages of grieving, some people, that's a misconception people have, that they go in order. Like you go from denial to anger, that it's a process, like a linear process, and it's not. There's stages, and you can kind of go, around the different stages. You can, and sometimes you go back and forth. So you might be in acceptance, but then you go back to like anger, and then you go, so they're not linear.
Okay.
Because grief isn't that simple,
Yeah.
So going back to your question, when we're talking about, let's say someone loses their job, right? So they might be initially in denial, like, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe that, they let me go. I've been there for so many years, right? And then they might go into anger. Oh my God, I can't believe they did that to me. You know, like I've been such a loyal employee. And then they might go into acceptance, like, okay, well, you know, I can't do anything about this. I need to find another job. Let me look for another job, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then again, so it's like, it's not a linear process, you know? So it's really, if the person experiences the event as a loss, then they can, you know, go into grieving, you know,
Yes.
not, and again, because it's such a personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it can be very different for different people. Like, again, someone might lose their job and they might be like, great, you know, now I know what I want to do.
Yes.
They're not
Or
grieving.
or a divorce, you know, like you lose a relationship. It could be like, oh my goodness, can't believe this happened to me. And you might be stuck in that.
Exactly.
You know, like, no, I'm still married, or, you know, like, don't want to let it go. And the other person might be like, oh, I'm free. You know, I'm
Exactly.
out of here. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's, you know, that's why grief is such a personal thing. It's such a personal experience, you know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. Yeah. And even though it's a very delicate, in a way, you know, subject, it's needed to
Mhm.
be open. You know, this type of conversations are needed so that we kind of know what strategies, what steps are out there the people, you know, have available, the
Yeah.
content, you know, to
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And that's, you know, that's why, you know, I'm so passionate about this, because I realized when I went through the grief educators program that, oh my gosh, I didn't know, you know.
our friend Yayoi is here. She said
Um,
it is
they
a matter
already-
of perspective. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it does. It takes many forms. And that's the thing, like, we're not educated on grief. In fact, we want to avoid that topic. We
Oh
want
yeah.
to avoid grief because we want to avoid death. Anything that we perceive as like negative or that doesn't make us feel good, we want to shy away from. And
Yeah.
so when it comes up, because it's part of life, death is part of life. I mean, think about it. I was one of those people that I often didn't know what to say to someone that had experienced, you know, the loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you say? Like, I'm sorry, or, you know, right? It sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I learned is that really the best thing, you don't have to say anything. Sometimes just sitting with the person and just letting them know, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
what they need. They just, again, they just need someone to witness their grief.
And I know it's been a few years already that your dad passed away. What was the gift? What was the meaning that you gave to that relationship to be okay?
You know what helps me was just to remember and embrace like all the all the things I learned from him. You know, like his, you know, he was a really like a hard worker, like, and you know, really good work ethics. And he was um someone that kind of like, he didn't really let things stress him out. And I am. So I always go back to, and I remember, you know, my dad, I'm like, you know, well, he would give me this advice, you know, don't let, you know, things get to
Yeah.
you, right? There are more
Yeah.
important things to worry about. So the meaning for me was really about my relationship with him and all the beautiful lessons that he, you know, that he gave me, right? Those are like, those are precious to me. And I will always have those with me. Right. And so I'll always have that connection with him. And so I always feel that he's with me. He's part of me, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Now, what about your miscarriage? What meaning do you give? I mean, what meaning do you give them in order for you to heal?
That was a process for me. And I remember when I went to, you know, to therapy, to bereavement counseling, and my therapist asked me something similar. I don't think she said meaning, but we were talking kind of like a similar, you know, topic. And I at that point, my husband and I had already adopted our kids. And so what I said was, I want to honor my babies, the ones that I lost, by being the best mother that I can be to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to do that. I don't have them, but I have, my 3 children. And so I want to honor them by doing that, and with time, now, like, the meaning for me is to help other women who have had that experience, because I know that you can feel alone, that you can feel there's a lot of shame and guilt because, there's so much tied to motherhood that our culture values, and the expectations. And so for me, really, the meaning is helping other women.
Beautiful. And here you are with us.
And here I
We
am.
have around 3 million people around right now, and you are inspiring them. Because
Oh,
we never know. I mean, maybe
yeah.
they might be grieving a job that they lost 5 years ago. They might still grieving, a divorce. They might still grieving a baby they lost. We just never know.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here, creating purpose, just, delivering a little bit of knowledge, wisdom, to help you all continue to moving on with joy and love. So,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
So, what are some of the common misconceptions about grief, and how do you work to help your clients through your coaching, like based on these misconceptions?
Yeah, so one, I mentioned already that grief is supposed to take X amount of time, right? So someone is, it's been a year and they're still grieving, and people think like, well, it's been a year. It's been a year since the divorce. Shouldn't she be over that and moved on and, find a new relationship, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not her timing. She's still grieving, and that's okay. Um, and I think that's like what we need to educate people on, you know? The other thing is
Not to rush, like not to rush them. That's how.
exactly just to
Okay.
normalize that it's going to take as long as it takes for them,
Okay.
not to compare just because, maybe
Susie only,
exactly
grief for 3 months, and then
right.
she's, you know,
Yeah.
back
I
on her feet.
yeah, I think of it like sort of kind of like trauma, right?
Mhm.
Like people say, 2 people have the same experience, and one, finds it traumatic and the other person doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't mean that because this person didn't find it traumatic, that it's not traumatic to this person,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, this is their experience, and so we need to respect and honor that, and
Yeah.
not tell them, basically that they're wrong for feeling how they feel. Instead, finding them the support to help them through that.
Meeting them where they're at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And we need to learn to be patient with people, going through grief, and take out our own beliefs around it, because it's their experience, it's not ours.
Definitely. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's their perspective. And at that time, our brain is silly. There's times that our brain picks up a certain thing to protect us,
Yeah,
and we might keep it for 10 years until we figure out, oh, this does not serve me. What was I thinking? But
exactly.
our brain just picked it up. I'm
Yeah,
going to be shy because this is going to protect me, or
yeah,
I'm going to eat 10 pancakes a day because that's going to protect me somehow. The brain makes sense that that's a protection way for us not to leave that pain, or like feel the pain again. So
yeah.
yeah,
I
until
mean,
we
that's
figure out, it's like, oh, this don't serve me anymore. And
yeah. I mean, that was my experience, especially with the miscarriages. Right, I had the first one. It was very, very painful, and it was traumatic for me. That was traumatic. And so when I had the second, and the third, and then the fourth, it was kind of like my brain went into that protection mode, and it's almost like I detached from the feeling, and it was just like, okay, it happened. Now let me get back to work. Let me get back to like my normal life. Let me not think about it. Let me not talk about it, because thinking about it and talking about it and feeling were painful. And like you said, our brain wants to protect us from that, so it avoids anything that that might cause pain or
yeah. Yeah, silly, and it's silly. It could be something really silly, but it's until we figure out, it's like, oh, this no longer serve me. Yeah, and the faster we heal, of course, is going to be better. But I mean, you and I know, we have a friend that it took her 18 years. 18 years to find herself again, because she was grieving for 18 years.
Yeah. And that's where we go into that could have been like complicated grief, right? Because yes, there is no timeline, but 18 years is, and for me, it was like over 10 years. And I think when you start to, and that's what I look for in my clients, is how long ago was the experience, the loss, and is it still impacting their life, and how? Are they still constantly talking about the loss? Are they feeling depressed over the loss? Are they feeling anxious over the loss? It's kind of like and that's how I can tell, like, it's kind of like your brain is stuck there, like literally in that loop,
Endless loop.
Yep.
Until something happens and you choose to get out.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good is really good content. And I'm, like, it's delicate. It feels like a very soft,
yes,
but it's needed. We need to talk about it, because you don't want to be stuck in that grief for 18 years like our friend. You don't want to be stuck for 10 years like Diana.
Yeah.
You don't. And the tools are out there, the strategies are out there, and we're here to deliver our wisdom.
Yeah. And sometimes, what I've learned is that really oftentimes what helps people to get unstuck, especially, when it's related to grief, is really to educate them about grief. Because then they start to realize that, like, it is normal for me to feel this way. It is okay for me to talk about it. It is okay for me to find support. It is okay for me to go find a therapist, a coach, whatever the support is, a family member. And then again, the other piece is just educating people in general, so that when they have someone, a friend, a loved one, a coworker that has experienced a loss, and they're kind of in that, in that grief, that they know how to give them support, and that they know how to, let them know that however they're feeling, it's normal, it's okay.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. I'm here. Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. So some women might find themselves stuck in the grieving process. How do you address this unresolvable grief, and guide them towards the path of healing and acceptance? Like acceptance, it's big.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you for being here.
Hi, Michael. Yes, I agree. These conversations are important. So the first thing I do is to just educate them about grief, normalize it, because it is a normal part of life and our experiences. And then depending on, where they are, I start giving them the support that they need, and, giving them different tools, techniques, strategies that they can use, and oftentimes part of that is also, empowering them as they learn about grief to pass that information on to their the people around them, you know, their husband, their kids, so that they can also start understanding my client.
And just talking about it, right,
Yeah.
Diana? Like just getting the baby steps of like talking about, this is what happened to me 5 years ago. I still feel this. I still, I'm dealing with this. Because I think one of the best therapies is just talk about it to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's not it's not easy to talk about. And again, depending on the situation, the loss, the experience. Like I said, in my case, you know, and for many women who have experienced a miscarriage, there's guilt and shame. You know, did I do something wrong? Did I do something to make this happen? And then there's, like I said, the shame of, you know, I can't be a mother, or I can't have biological children. And, you know, the world kind of expects that, right? And you know, I thought I was going to be able to do that. And, you know, what is my husband going to think now? What are my parents going to think? And what, you know, all these things. And that's where it gets tied to our identity, you know, and it kind of complicates things, because now it's like, if I'm not processing my grief and I'm kind of stuck, now I'm really stuck in that loss of identity, you know, of like, okay, I'm not going to be a mother. What does that mean? Right? And so then that leads to more shame and more guilt, and we start stacking it. And so instead of kind of being able to get ourselves out of that, we're kind of like, you know, digging ourselves deeper in that, unless we get the help that we need.
Yeah. And, here we go. When is the best time to get help? Anybody I know anybody in our audience right now that might be dealing with grief, what would you tell them?
I think if anyone experiencing grief should be able to have someone, it can be a family member, it can be a trusted friend, that is willing to, like I said, sit with them, that's willing to meet them where they're at, that's willing to listen to them. Maybe they want to talk about how much they miss the person. You know, maybe they want to talk about, I can't believe that, you know, they let me go when I had been there for 20 years. It's so unfair, right? So the support is really not about solving anything. It's just really listening. And that is truly like what it is. It's just sitting with them, listening and witnessing the grief.
Okay.
Right?
Being
there for them. Now, if it's something that's impacting really, like they're impacting their life in a negative way, like it was for me, like I started to get depressed. I started to really just become very negative. Eventually to the point where like I no longer wanted to be here, right? And I'm holding a bottle of pills in my hand. I knew at that point that I needed help, you know? Yeah. So at any point, you know, there's no like right or wrong with grief. So at any point that you feel you need help, you need support, just reach out to someone, find somebody, you know?
Here we go back. You just shared something very important that probably a lot of people have, at least thought, I don't want to be here. The pain is too much. What was your turn away that you said, okay, I'm not going to do that? What was the decision, what allowed you to say, I'm not going to do that? There's better ways to heal.
For me, it was really like I sat on my bed. I remember that day so clearly. I sat on my bed, I took out a bottle of pills, and I was just like, that's it. Like, I no longer want to be here. And I heard a little voice, I heard a voice that said, it's not your time, don't give up. And somehow that's what I needed. Now, it could have been, my inner voice. It could have been, God. It could have, I don't know. All I know is that's what I heard. it could have been my own like will to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I put the bottle of pills away, and immediately I found, a professional. I found a therapist, and I called and I made an appointment. And she was like, coming tomorrow.
Wow.
So I really want people to know, like, if you find yourself in that situation, please reach out to somebody. Reach out to somebody, because you can get through this. You can get through this, and one day you will look back and realize that your life is very different now, and that you were able to get through that pain, and that your life can go on, and you can create whatever kind of life you envision. You can create that. It takes time, and there are many steps, but you can get there. And it's not a competition. There's no, just take your time, but really just seek help, reach out to someone, because there are people out there, that can help you. Even just a trusted friend. Share how you feel. A lot of times, that's the other thing. When we have those feelings, I know for me that was the case, where you feel so bad, you feel depressed, you feel like you no longer want to be here. That creates more shame, and sometimes more guilt, because in my case, I had my 3 kids, and I had, a wonderful husband, and family, extended family, and all that. And so I felt like, why do I feel this way? I have an amazing family. I have a loving husband. Why can't I just be okay?
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Thanks for sharing. I know that's very personal. So thanks for sharing with our beautiful audience today. Because, like, I know there's people out there that have thought, at least half the thought, or like, it would be easier if if
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were no longer here.
Yeah. And I share that. And for many years, I didn't talk about that. I didn't talk about the miscarriages. I didn't, I never thought, this is like, I never thought that I would one day like be here, like, sharing all that. But the thing is that with, all my inner work, all of the work that I've done, and like I said, this is part of like the meaning, right? This is my meaning.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't do anything about the losses. I can't change that. But what can I do now, today, tomorrow, moving forward, to make that, so that it didn't happen for, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
that,
Yes.
yeah, so there's meaning. And so yeah, so that's why I'm I share that with people now, because I want them to know that I've been through, those experiences. I felt, awful at one point. I didn't want to be here anymore, yet here I am.
Wow. Tell us about the identity and the self-esteem of someone that went through a traumatic loss. What happens to that identity and self-esteem?
Yeah, well, the identity piece can be because it's the loss of the role that they played in whatever that situation, right? So someone that lost their job, it's the loss of that role. Of, I worked for whatever company doing X, Y, and Z, and I was there for so many years, right? Because we identify with what we do, right? Or maybe it's someone, a divorce. So now, the woman feels like, I'm no longer a wife. I don't no longer have a marriage. What does that mean for me? Like, who am I? It's the loss of that identity. In my case, the loss of that division of motherhood, So, that impacts our self-esteem, because, like I said, oftentimes our identity is tied to what we do, not who we really are.
Yeah.
Right. So, someone that lost their job, they might feel like, well, I can't really provide for my family now. You know, what does that make me? It makes me, if it's a man, it makes me a bad father, it makes me a bad husband, it makes me all of these things, right? So that impacts their self-esteem. And, if it's a loss of our relationship, the person, either the man or the woman might feel, or whomever it is might feel like I'm not lovable, right? I'm not wanted.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what happens too is with grief, it's going to bring up our wounds, our old wounds, right? So if we have stuff like abandonment stuff from childhood, it's going to come up.
Okay. So then you have a mix of a pot of pain that we have to slowly heal. If this
Yeah,
happened in my childhood, learn to, heal,
yeah,
and it might help us heal a little bit of what just happened. But here we go. It's like the praying and the training never stops.
yes,
We must continue to pray. We must continue to train
yep,
to continue to heal and grow, so that we can educate those around us.
exactly. And I think that's why it's important to really, and I'm a big, believer in, we really start with ourselves. And that's been my journey. I'm very curious about me, you know, like why I think what I think, why I do what I do, why, like all of these things. And it's not in a selfish kind of way, or, in a narcissistic kind of way, but it's more like to really, because I want to understand myself, because the more I, excuse me, understand myself, that's going to help me to understand other people,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's like, yes, keep praying, keep training. It never ends. It's like life continues to change. We dive into new stages, things happen, and the more prepared we are, the better we'll be able to handle and manage those situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and definitely it's like identity is, I think, it's one of the things that all coaches work with their clients at first. Who are
Mhm.
you, or who do you want to be?
Right.
And the beauty of it is like you can reinvent yourself, and even at a better, version.
Absolutely. I
So
mean, I think that's what I did. I went from feeling, really sad and depressed, and feeling that I wasn't, feeling like a failure, feeling not good enough, right? Because I had those experiences, to now like coaching women, and some men, helping women kind of go through that process, and get them to the other side, much faster than it took me, because I don't want women or anyone to stay stuck like that for as long as I did, because there's really no need. With the right, help, the right support, the right tools, the right techniques, we can move, further faster.
yes, definitely, I totally agree with you. So what strategies do you use to help women, you help them to maintain, that self-esteem and identity through these challenging times?
Yeah, a lot of the work is really like teaching them about like self-love and self-care
Okay.
and self-compassion, right? And again, helping them to really understand themselves, and not make um, so that they don't think there's a right or wrong thing, because
Mhm.
really there is no right or wrong. It's just, it is what it is, and it's what we do with it, right?
Yes.
That's my perspective anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
And a phrase just pop up, in my head, and I'm going to share with you because you know this phrase, and it's like, life is happening for you, right? What are you
mhm.
going to do?
Yeah,
Every single scenario that you live today, it happened for you.
right.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, yeah. It's really, helping them, like I said, with their mindset, the way their thoughts and their beliefs, their limiting beliefs, right? And I love that. And I was just on another show, and I said the same thing. It is life happens for me, not to me. And also understanding that life happens to everyone, because a lot of times we feel like the only person that thing is happening to, and you feel alone. And it's really understanding these are just things that happen in life. Women have miscarriages. Women, we lose our loved ones. People die. That's just part of life. It's not just happening to that one person.
Yeah.
And I think it's just really about helping people understand like that process, and understand that these things are part of life, and it happened. It's painful. You didn't want that to happen, but it did. So what now? Right? What do you want now? Like we know, what do you want?
Yeah, what do you want?
What do you want?
Where
Yeah.
can we find you? If there's anyone over here that says, I want to learn more from Diana, where can they find you?
So you can visit my website. It's dianaparrainternational.com. And you can definitely connect with me on social media. My Instagram handle is at DianaParra888. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Do you have a last message that you would love to leave to this beautiful audience right now?
It's really what I said before. If there's, if you're in a lot of pain, if you're grieving, if you don't know what to do, if you feel stuck in that, if you just get help, get support, find a friend, find a family member, someone that can be there for you and can help you with that, because you can get to the other side. It might take time, but you can get to the other side.
Thank you. One of the things that pop in my head is like a lot of immigrants grieve their country.
Yeah.
That's another example of grieving. And sometimes
Absolutely.
we dive into a sad spot because we think it's the right thing to do. We think we must feel sad because we're not with our loved ones in our native country.
Right.
And it's not. Maybe we should have another show, Diana, because I know you probably have experienced that. You probably have grieved your country, where you were born, and you probably have grieved the time that you're no longer with your loved ones physically as you used to be, because I know I was there. So maybe we could create a show for beautiful immigrants that might be, maybe they might be grieving their native country.
Yeah, because that is a loss of identity. It's kind of tied to that. So yes.
Yes. Let's plan a show for that, because
Absolutely.
I know that I'm an example of that. I lived that until I woke up and I'm like, what are you doing? Wasting your time. So
yeah, I would love to.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for being here today. If you would like to watch the replay, you can go to my YouTube channel, Paola Guthrie. Or, you can go to the Spanglish Radio Network. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca for news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Blessings to you all, and let's be magnanimous.